Birthdays are supposed to mean something, especially when it's your own child who remembers them. But this year, my phone stayed silent. No call, no card, not even a text. My son, he forgot my birthday. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. I had always been there for him, supporting him, even paying part of his rent when times got tough. So when his due date came around, I made a choice of my own. I forgot something too. His rent payment. Stay with me, because this story has a twist he'll never forget. I woke up that morning with a smile. Birthdays don't mean as much when you get older, but still, a simple call, a card, a happy birthday, Mom, goes a long way. I put the coffee on, opened the curtains, and let the sunlight spill into the room. I thought to myself, today will be nice. The hours ticked by slowly. A neighbor dropped off muffins. My sister called, and we laughed about old times. Even the lady at the pharmacy remembered to wish me well. But my son, my only child, silence. I kept glancing at the phone. Maybe he was busy. Maybe he was planning a surprise. I told myself 100 excuses. But as the day stretched on, each excuse wore thinner, until I couldn't lie to myself anymore. He had forgotten. It wasn't just the absence of a gift. I didn't need flowers or expensive dinners. All I wanted was acknowledgement, a reminder that in his world I still mattered, that the woman who gave him life, who stayed up with him through fevers, who clapped at his school plays and saved for his college fund, still meant something. Instead, I sat alone at the kitchen table, a slice of cake with one candle lit just for me. I blew it out in silence, whispering a wish I never thought I'd make. Please, let him remember next year. The hardest part? This wasn't the first time. When he was younger, birthdays were magical. He'd scribble little cards in crayon, bring me flowers he picked from the yard, hug me so tightly I thought my ribs might crack. As he grew older, the gestures grew simpler, but they still came. A phone call, a dinner together, even just a quick hug with the words, "Happy birthday, Mom." But lately, it felt like I was fading into the background of his busy life. Work, friends, bills, everything else seemed more important. And now my birthday had slipped through the cracks. I tried not to cry, but the tears came anyway. Not because I needed attention, but because it hurt to feel forgotten by the one person who should never forget. Later that evening, I finally got a message. Not from him, but from his landlord, a reminder that rent was due in 2 days. I had been helping him with it for months, covering what his paycheck couldn't. It wasn't easy for me, but I did it gladly, because that's what mothers do. I stared at that message for a long time. My heart still ached from the silence of the day, but another feeling stirred too, resolve. Maybe it was time he learned that love isn't something to take for granted. That even mothers, as patient as we are, feel the sting of neglect. So I whispered to myself, if he can forget my birthday, I can forget his rent. And with that decision, a shift began inside me. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about it. His birthday message to me never came. Not a belated text, not a call with an apology, nothing. Just silence, like the day itself had been erased. But what didn't stay silent was my phone, buzzing with reminders about his rent. The landlord's notice, the date circled on my calendar. For months now, I had been slipping money from my own savings to keep him afloat. He never asked outright. He just assumed I would cover the shortfall. And I did, because I loved him, because I didn't want to see him struggle. But that morning, I sat with my checkbook open and my pen hovering. My heart wavered. On one side was the voice every mother knows, the one that says, he's your son. You don't let him sink, no matter what. On the other side was the ache still raw from my birthday, the memory of waiting by the phone, of blowing out a candle alone, of realizing I didn't even cross his mind. I poured myself another cup of coffee, staring at the numbers. Could I really do it? Could I really let him face the landlord without my safety net? I remembered the first time I ever helped him with rent. He was fresh out of college, juggling 2 part-time jobs, barely scraping by. He called me, embarrassed, his voice cracking. Mom, I don't know if I can make it. My heart broke. Without hesitation, I transferred money to his account. That was years ago. Back then, I thought it was temporary. Just a little help until he found his footing. But somehow it became a pattern. And I enabled it, because mothers always want to protect. But who was protecting me? Who remembered my needs, my feelings? I thought about the younger version of myself, the one who saved every penny, skipped meals sometimes, worked double shifts so my son could have a better life. I didn't have anyone covering my rent back then. I learned the hard way. And maybe he needed to learn too. I sighed and closed the checkbook. My hand trembled, not from age, but from resolve. Not this time, I whispered into the empty kitchen. The guilt hit me immediately. What if the landlord was harsh? What if my son got angry? What if this decision drove us further apart? But then another thought rose. Maybe it would wake him up. Maybe it would remind him that love is a two-way street, that birthdays matter, that mothers matter. That evening, I sat by the window, watching the sun dip low, painting the sky orange. I thought about calling him, reminding him gently about the rent, slipping him the money like always. But I didn't. For the first time in years, I held back. And as hard as it was, I knew deep down it was the right choice. Because forgetting his rent wasn't about revenge. It was about teaching him what it felt like to be forgotten. And sometimes, the hardest lessons are the ones that finally stick. The first of the month arrived like clockwork. Normally, by this point, I would have already sent the money quietly, slipping it into his account so the landlord never had to knock. But this time, the account stayed empty. I woke up early that morning, my stomach tied in knots. I kept asking myself, am I really doing this? Am I really going to let him feel the weight of it? My heart whispered to give in, but my resolve reminded me of that silent birthday, of waiting all day for a call that never came. By noon, my phone buzzed. It was him. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times before answering. "Mom!" His voice was frantic. "The rent's due today." "Did you forget?" I took a deep breath, steadying my tone. "Yes, I suppose I did." Silence on the other end. I could almost hear his confusion, his disbelief. Finally, he stammered, "But what do you mean you forgot?" "I mean exactly that," I said gently. "I forgot. Just like you forgot my birthday." The line went quiet again. Then a sharp exhale. "Mom, this isn't funny. The landlord's on me. I don't have enough to cover it. I need your help." I closed my eyes, my heart aching. Every part of me wanted to swoop in, to rescue him like I always had. But instead, I let the silence stretch. Finally, I said, "I know it's hard, but I can't keep carrying this for you." He groaned, frustration spilling into his words. "You don't understand. I'll get kicked out." I stayed calm, though my hands trembled. "I do understand, more than you think. I once had to scrape together rent on my own, too. No one covered it for me. I learned. Maybe it's time you learn as well." He muttered under his breath, angry, maybe even a little scared. "I can't believe you're doing this to me." Those words stung, but I reminded myself why I was standing firm. This wasn't punishment. It was a lesson. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at my hands. They had cooked his meals, held him through nightmares, clapped for him at every milestone. And now, for the first time, they were refusing to save him. That evening, my phone buzzed again. More calls. More texts. Some angry, some pleading. I read them all, my heart twisting, but I didn't cave. I knew if I gave in now, the pattern would never break. As night fell, I whispered to myself, "He needs this. He needs to know how it feels." And deep down, I hoped with all my heart, that one day he'd look back on this moment not with anger, but with understanding. Because sometimes love isn't giving more. Sometimes love is stepping back and letting them stand on their own. The next morning, my phone rang again. His name lit up the screen. I hesitated, then answered. His voice was different this time. Tired, strained, not filled with the same anger as before. "Mom," he sighed. "The landlord came by. I had to explain I was short." He wasn't happy. I stayed quiet, letting him continue. "I tried calling a couple friends. No one could help. I even thought about asking for an advance at work. But I was embarrassed." His voice cracked on that last word. For the first time, I heard something I hadn't heard in years. Humility. He cleared his throat. "I don't get it. You've always helped me. Why stop now?" I took a deep breath. "Because I love you too much to keep letting you forget what responsibility feels like. And because when you forgot my birthday, it showed me something, that you've started taking me for granted." There was silence on the line, then a shaky whisper. "I didn't mean to. I didn't think." His words pierced me, because they were true. He hadn't thought. I wasn't a priority in his busy world, and that's exactly why I had to let him stumble now, so he would start thinking. "I know you didn't mean to," I said gently, "but do you see how it feels to be forgotten, to be left standing alone?" He didn't answer right away, but I could hear his breathing, slow and uneven. Finally, he muttered, "Yeah, I see it now." The admission was small, but it mattered. That week was hard for him. He juggled bills, cut back on things he usually spent freely on, and worked extra hours. He sent me short, clipped texts, sometimes frustrated, sometimes distant, but beneath them I could sense a shift. He was learning. Then 3 days later, he showed up at my door. He didn't call first. He just knocked, and when I opened the door, there he was, disheveled, tired, holding a small bag of groceries. "Thought maybe we could cook dinner together," he said softly. As we chopped vegetables side by side, he finally spoke the words I had been waiting for. I'm sorry, Mom, for forgetting your birthday, for assuming you'd always fix everything. I didn't realize how much you do for me. I thought it was just money, but it's more than that. It's love, and I've been blind to it. My throat tightened, tears threatening to spill. I reached over and squeezed his hand. That's all I wanted, for you to see it. We ate together that night, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like he was truly present. Not distracted, not distant, just there, with me. He still had to sort things out with the landlord, and I knew his road wouldn't suddenly get easier. But in his eyes, I saw something new. Respect, gratitude, awareness, and in my heart, I knew the lesson had begun to take root. The weeks that followed were quieter. He didn't lean on me the way he used to. Not for rent, not for bills. Instead, he started figuring things out on his own. I could tell it wasn't easy. There were days he sounded worn out, and nights when his texts were short, almost curt. But woven into all of that was something different. Effort. He was trying. Then one Saturday morning he called. His voice was lighter than it had been in months. Mom, he said, I covered rent. All of it. No help. I could hear the pride in his tone, and it made my heart swell. That's wonderful, sweetheart. I'm proud of you. He paused, then added, I should have been doing this a long time ago. I guess I just leaned on you too much because I knew you'd always be there. His honesty touched me. That's what mothers do, I said softly. But even mothers need to be seen, remembered. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I do see you now. And I'm sorry it took me forgetting your birthday to realize what I was taking for granted. After that, things changed in small but meaningful ways. He called more often, sometimes just to chat, sometimes to ask how I was feeling, if I needed anything. He came by with groceries a couple of times, even fixed the leaky faucet in my kitchen without me asking. They weren't grand gestures, but they were genuine, and they meant more to me than he could ever know. One evening, he showed up at my door with a cake. It wasn't my birthday, but he smiled sheepishly and said, Figured we could practice, so I don't forget again. I laughed, tears prickling my eyes. You don't have to bring me cake, just your love. But as we lit the candles and shared slices at my kitchen table, I realized something important. The rent, the money, even the birthday, it was never about those things themselves. It was about acknowledgement, about not fading into the background of his busy life, about knowing that in his world, I still mattered. And now, I knew I did. That night before he left, he hugged me tight, the way he used to when he was little. Thanks for not bailing me out, he whispered. I didn't get it then, but I do now. You weren't punishing me. You were teaching me. I squeezed him back, my heart full. And you learned. As I watched him drive away, I felt lighter than I had in years, because the boy I had raised had finally stepped into manhood, not just by paying his bills, but by recognizing the love that carried him there. And as for me, I had learned too, sometimes the best way to love your child isn't by protecting them from every stumble, but by letting them stand, even if it means they fall first. So in the end, it wasn't about a birthday or a missed rent check. It was about something deeper, about love, respect, and learning to see each other clearly. My son finally understood that I wasn't just a safety net or a background figure in his life. I was his mother. And mothers, no matter how strong, still need to feel valued. And I learned, too, that sometimes the greatest act of love is stepping back and letting them grow. So if you've ever felt forgotten, remember this. Your worth doesn't fade with age. Sometimes it takes a hard moment for others to realize it. But when they do, the bond becomes stronger than ever.